Hey y'all, what you're looking at is the oil pickup tube and the oil pan and its orientation inside of there. That gives you a really good look at the way this should be. Now I know this is a model, but I thought this would be a perfect way to, show off what I'm talking about and show you what I'm talking about. All right, let's go look at something else. Okay, y'all, we're back and I'm showing you a little bit more here. Changing the oil on my daughter's Jeep Cherokee. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, what are you talking about here? I'm talking about your oil level, okay, and where it is in the engine and the importance it plays on making horsepower inside of an engine. The relationship of the oil pump pickup tube to the bottom of the oil pan. I don't know if you can see that there, but that's just below the hash marks. Just so you know, there's a series of hash marks right here. And these hash marks, yeah, right there, that's where you should keep your oil level, okay? If it's like down here at the very bottom, where I like to keep them, that's good enough. Or you can keep it up here at the very top. Now, here's something to remember, though. When you keep it up here at the very top, guess what it's going to be closer to? You want to guess? I'll show you. It's going to be close to this guy right here. Okay? The crankshaft. Okay? That thing's busy spinning around down there in the bottom of your engine close to the oil level. If it gets really high up here on this stick, if your oil level gets very high, very high on those hash marks, then you got windage. What is windage? Windage is basically that oil that gets flipped around, frothed around inside of your engine. Okay? It's getting flipped and flopped around by the crank. The crank's picking it up and slinging it around. That might sound like, in some cases, it might sound like it's a pretty good thing because it's slinging that oil around to help lubricate everything else. Well, actually, no, it isn't. Because what happens is that slows the crankshaft down. Okay? It's called parasitic loss. So, if we have parasitic loss, that parasitic loss, takes horsepower away from the engine. Okay? Now, if you will, let me show you what I'm talking about. Parasitic loss or parasitic drag. Okay? Parasitic drag, let me give you an example. All right, we've all rode bicycles, right? Everybody's rode a bicycle before. Now, we've rode bicycles up. Now, we know we go up a hill, it's harder to ride a bicycle up a hill than it is on flat, level ground. We know this. We're well aware of this. Everybody who's rode a bicycle knows this. Or just about everybody. Let's just say that. Okay. So, where are we at? Oh, hey, we're right in the middle on our hash marks there. So I think we're pretty good. So I'm going to let this one go. Okay. I'm going to call this good. Now, if that windage, like I said, the windage is parasitic loss. So, when going back to the bicycle, we're riding a bicycle, we're riding it uphill. It's harder to ride it uphill than it is to ride on flat, level ground. Now, if we ride it on the flat, level ground, but the wind is blowing against us really really strongly, it slows us down. It makes it harder to maintain a certain amount of speed. Now, nowadays we've got the GPS speedometers on our phones, and you can actually track that. If you're like me, you ride a bicycle every once in a while. So, right, you can track that sort of thing. If you're not, I'll give you another example. Parasitic loss. Look at the front of this engine. We've got our crank pulley down here. We've got our water pump. We've got our crankshaft. We've got our alternator. Okay. Now, these things, if we have just the engine running with just this, and we're not turning the water pump off of the crank, and we're not turning the alternator off of the crank, and we're not turning any other accessory like these off of the crank, then we have no parasitic loss. Right? Right. But what happens? Well, then, if you don't have anything turning the water pump, the engine's going to overheat. And if you don't have nothing turning the alternator, then your battery is going to run down. So, we got to have some way, and if we don't have nothing, even though I don't have a power steering pump on this engine, if we didn't have, in a vehicle, you have the power steering pump, nothing's turning the power steering pump, guess what? It's really hard to steer, isn't it? Of course it is. So, that's the examples of parasitic loss. Okay, so we have these other things that is robbing a little bit of power off of the crank to power these other accessories so that we can make the vehicle easier to steer, keep the battery charged, keep the engine cool, that sort of thing. Now, what if we apply that same sort of thinking, though, to the oil that gets slung up by the crank? Now, like I said earlier, the oil getting slung up by the crank, this might seem like a great idea because we're allowing the crankshaft to sling that oil up and to whip it up and to sling it onto other things. The thing of it is, though, as the engine is running, you have the oil pump that is pumping the oil through the oil galleries to your main bearing saddles, into the bearings, into the crank. Okay? That oil will come out into the rod bearings. Once it comes out into the rod bearings, it will go through, it'll come out partially out of the rod bearings. Sometimes some engines will have a passage that goes up to the piston, lubricates the piston wrist pin, and then even sometimes cools the bottom of the piston. Okay, so we already have some sling off the crank already. We don't need really any more. Okay, the engineers have already thought of all of that. So if you have the crank sitting there whipping the oil up, with too much oil in the crank, in the oil pan, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have that windage. Okay, that windage not only slows that crankshaft down and robs power from the engine, but it also does something else. It froths that oil up into a foam. Okay, that foam aerates the oil, and that aeration is not good, because if there's enough of it long enough, it gets down to the oil pump. The oil pump's trying to pump it up, and you have a lack of pressure, because now the oil pump is not pumping so much oil, it's pumping a little more air. You see where I'm going? Okay, so we don't need that, all right, because the crank, all right, the crankshaft rides on the bearing. It doesn't ride on the bearing, okay? It rides on a film of oil. As a matter of fact, I just pulled this off. There's a film of oil still on it, okay? You see, there's one of the galleries right there in the crank, okay? This is a main bearing. The crank is actually lifted off of these main bearings, okay, by the pressure of the oil pump, okay? So when you're looking at that gauge and it says 50 or 60 pounds or whatever, and you're looking at that, 40 pounds or 30 pounds or what have you, it's lifting that crank off of its bearings. Okay? So that's what you want to be concerned with. All right? Now, windage is, there is a lot of companies that have poured a lot of time and money and effort and engineering and research and development into windage. And I'm going to show you one of the results of that in just a minute. Okay, we're back. Now, I left off with that a lot of companies, automotive companies, have done, and probably a lot of oil companies as well, have done a tremendous amount of research, development, and engineering on this particular problem. And, well, I've got some of the results from that. One of the things that has been done, and this is something that Mopar Performance strongly recommends, is, ta-da! Yep, this is a windage tray. Okay, now, this is a small block LA windage tray. I know it's got rust on it. I'm going to clean that off. I've got that handled. I've got that covered. Okay. As you can see, I've got the hardware kit for it too as well. So my original thinking was, when I was putting my 360 together, was I remembered I had this, but I just didn't feel like I needed it. Well, now I'm sort of thinking, oil control, even at, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 RPMs could be a very good thing on an engine like this. Especially when it's going to be compression challenged anyway. It doesn't need anything else that's going to slow it down. Okay? It doesn't need anything that's going to drag any more power out of it. So, I'm going to go with this. As long as it works, I'm going to go with this. So, I'm pretty sure this will work though. Okay, so, I don't think there's a different one for the 360. I'm pretty sure that all the LAs use the same windage tray. So, and I've got the hardware right here. As you can see, this is the ARP 2405501. Do not wholly rely on that part number. That may have changed, because this kit is a few years old. Okay, I've never used it. I've never used this tray either. I bought this tray used though, as you can tell. But so what I'm going to do next, what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be taking my oil pan, pickup tube, and pump off, and taking out taking off the main bearing caps and replacing the bolts with these right here. And I'm going to be checking the bearing clearances again, but I want to do it, and I want to make sure that they're going to be okay with these studs versus just the bolts. So, but I want to talk to you real quick about something that is important. I went and done here recently. I hope it inspires the rest of you to do the same. I got my second round COVID shot, a Moderna. For those of you who are thinking that you're worried about some sort of side effects, the only real side effect that I have had is I have felt some soreness in my arm, both times, the first round and the second round. And I have felt some flu-like symptoms with the second round. As a matter of fact, yesterday was just the day after I got my second round shot, and I felt like just crap all day long. So, yeah, not one of my favorite things to do. I don't like getting shots at all. I hate shots. I'm not real crazy about needles. I'm not, you know, if I see a needle, I don't faint. I don't lose my mind or get, you know, go crazy or nothing like that. But it is a, you know, it's not one of my favorite things. So, you know, anyway, you know, I went and did it, and that's that. You know, so now uh, I just want to tell you, you know, hey, don't be scared to go do it. Go ahead and do it. You know, don't be terrified of it. It's not that big a deal. It's just, you know, it's just something we all need to do because this COVID business, I mean, it's real and it can make you very, very sick. It can kill you. I mean, just in my little county here, with what few people we have here, there's been 6 deaths, you know, in this county. And we don't have a lot of people here. So you can imagine you know, it's pretty serious business. Which, you know, 6 doesn't sound like a lot of numbers, but when you compare the amount of people that are here, it's like, you know, it's concerning. Uh, you know, especially when, you know, you're saying, when you're somebody that's like, yeah, I'm not getting a shot. Yeah, I don't want to get that shot. No, man, I ain't getting that shot. Well, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. Okay, it's just something. It's just like any other shot. Okay, you know, you get a flu shot. You know, a lot of folks get a flu shot every year. You know, and they feel a little headache and they get a little sick from that. Okay, so you know, be a man. Come on, be a big guy. Yeah. All right. I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all so much for everything, the subscriptions, the likes, the shares, all of that. I just really, 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 seriously appreciate it. And I want to say just a big thank you for all of that. So, and also, God bless and have a great one.